So up to this point in our short-term operating assets videos, we've talked about contra assets, we've talked about the two allowance methods, percent of sales and aging schedule, that are both allowed by GAAP. And the next one we'll talk about is actually not allowed by GAAP, and we're going to see why that is. But it's called the direct write-off method in accounting for our uncollectibles, what we don't expect to collect in our accounts receivables. The reason this is not acceptable by GAAP is because we actually wait until we deem a specific customer to be uncollectible, and then we write them off. Well, what happens when we sold them their merchandise last year, and now we're in the following year? That's when it becomes an issue because we're no longer following the matching principle. So let's look at Bob Rassler. He's an attorney in Los Angeles. Rassler uses the direct write-off method to account for uncollectible receivables. At May 31st, Rassler's accounts receivables totaled $14,000. During June, he earned revenue of $20,000 on account and collected $19,000 on account. He also wrote off uncollectible receivables of $2,000. So using the direct write-off method, we're going to journalize Rassler's write-off of uncollectible receivables. So the way we're going to do this under the direct write-off method is we're just going to write this customer off, okay? Or these customers off, whatever that happens to be, by debiting bad debt expense and crediting their account receivable. So whatever specific customer or customers we've deemed to be uncollectible, we're writing them off in this journal entry. So notice we are crediting account receivable immediately. What I also want you to note is there's no allowance account like there was under percent of sales or aging schedule. Okay, there is no allowance account in the direct write-off method. We're just writing off a customer immediately when we know they are not going to be collectible. So what is Rassler's balance of accounts receivable at June 30th? And does he expect to collect all of this amount? We're just going to draw a simple T account to figure out what the balance is. So we have our account receivable T account. Our beginning balance, the story told us, was $14,000, and we earned revenues of $20,000 on account, and we collected $19,000 of that. And we wrote off $2,000, so we post that journal entry there in red. We post the account receivable credit of $2,000 into our T account, and we find our ending balance to be $13,000. But then it asks, does Rassler really expect to collect all of this amount? And remember, from the percent of sales and the aging schedule, accounts receivable didn't change until we actually wrote off an account. So we might not expect to collect the entire balance in accounts receivable under the allowance methods, but under the direct write-off method, we've actually written off anyone we know is not going to be collectible at that point. So we actually do expect, or Rassler actually does expect, to collect this amount because he's written off anyone he doesn't expect to collect. So now, just to wrap up, remember, this method is not allowed by GAAP because we may have recorded a sale in 1 year and it may be 1 or 2 years later before we deem a specific account to not be collectible, and that's when we record the expense. So this violates the matching principle because the revenue is not recorded in the same period as the expense. Under the allowance methods, percent of sales, or the aging schedule, this is not the case. We actually record the expense, the potential expense, the same period as the sales revenue. Don't forget, if you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up, and questions and comments are always welcome.